There we go.
Well, happy Sunday, everybody. These are the Gospel Hours. I'm Pastor Art, and we are delighted to have as our guest today Ann Treacy, who is with us all the way from Minnesota. And say hi so people know that you're on, and we're so good. We're so grateful to have you.
Hi. Yes, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm looking forward to a healthy and wholesome conversation about connectivity, broadband, digital inclusion, digital equity, wherever our conversation goes. We're both been at this for a good long time. So
Yeah.
I am hoping that our information will help enlighten and will provide, some new directions and thought, especially in this time of pandemic.
Right.
And so I'm going to just read a little bit about your background, just so people get a flavor for the quality and the quantity of work that you've done, the quality of work and the quantity of work that you've done. Again, I'm Pastor Art. These are the Gospel Hours. This is our 16th year of being on radio, and we have this segment that we call GH Talks. And so it means, that we kind of power down the music and bring out kind of the informational sharing. And so Ann is with the Blandin Foundation, which is a private foundation based in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Now, I always thought Grand Rapids there was a Grand Rapids, Detroit, or Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Michigan. That's the other. That's it. No, I have to say that I work with the Blandin Foundation on a contract basis. I'm in St. Paul. I'm in sunny, snowy St. Paul, but yes, there are two Grand Rapids.
And they're both really cold and snowy during the wintertime, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I know Michigan is. So their mission, talking about the Blandin Foundation, is to be trusted partners and advocates to strengthen rural Minnesota communities, especially the Grand Rapids area. Their vision is healthy, inclusive rural communities. And there's a lot there that we're going to unpack. Healthy, inclusive rural communities. Starting 20 years ago, the Blandin Foundation recognized that broadband was a key tool in helping rural communities thrive, and has worked on broadband issues since 1994, both supporting deployment of broadband and helping people and businesses better use broadband through digital inclusion, some of the things that we want to talk about and open up today, digital inclusion training, online marketing, consulting. In the mid-1990s, she introduced Minnesota to the idea of the internet touring rural communities and even tabling a booth in the Minnesota State Fair. So we have our own state fair here in New York. So I know what that's all about. Few people knew that the internet was what the internet was back then, and Ann helped them navigate both how and to get access and how to use it. And that's the component that people don't understand a lot of times when they talk about the internet. You need to have access, you know how to use it, you need to have a device to get onto it, and you have connectivity that allows you to do what you need to do on there. And so, Ann, I'm going to stop right there. I mean, I could go on. You've got a lot of good credentials here. So let's start our conversation here. What brought you to the rural broadband community and the practice of helping people in the rural areas? It's kind of unique. You don't see expertise expanded on the rural communities with regard to connectivity and broadband. So how did you get there?
Well, it really sort of started back in 1994. And the funny thing is, I had just moved back to Minnesota from Ireland, where I had just gotten a master's degree in Irish literature. And it turns out that an Irish degree in Irish literature opens up to not a lot of different jobs. And I met somebody who just kind of took a shine to me and asked me, what I knew about the internet. And back then, honestly, the answer was pretty limited. I had some use of it, tried to connect with people back home while in Ireland, but they hired me. I worked for Minnesota Regional Network. It was one of the early regional networks. It was a
Okay.
nonprofit, and it was a
Mhm.
collaboration with the University of Minnesota, Honeywell, some of the other big Minnesota companies, a couple other different things, and they hired me to kind of I'll say do education, started to do sales and marketing, but really were some fun days. People would call me and they'd say, my boss says I should call and we need to figure out whether we should get a computer, a fax machine, or the internet.
And so you have to answer those questions and get them
Answer those
the
questions and kind of
information,
get
and
them.
that's
Exactly. And then while I was there, the push, it was Minnesota Regional Network. Again, it was Twin Cities based to a certain extent. The internet did go as far as most of the universities, but there was a real push back then called the Rural Datification Project. And that was a project back then, actually, I think it was to get a 56K connection into various counties throughout Minnesota. So that was kind of my introduction to it, which was a funny introduction to somebody who had mostly been a city kid. I had grown up in between St. Paul and Chicago all of my life, but I love the rural areas. I love to see the connection that it can bring. I mean, you fast forward now, how many years now? 25 years.
almost 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, almost 30 years. Fast forward and see what a difference it's making. See what a difference it's making to the rural communities that have it and the rural communities that know how to use it. And it's
Correct.
really, as you kind of get to, it's really that 1-2 punch, First you got to
Exactly.
have it, and then you got to know how to use it. I have a
Well,
coworker who will often say,
before we go all the way there, that
sure.
20, almost 30 years, to talk about, the next thing I really want to talk about is just is the Blandin Blandin Foundation. Before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other stops along the way at the network, and what you did in order to to get there, because it's those kind of things, those experiences that really you bring to the table. And when you bring those kind of experiences, they have a way of shaping what it is that you do and how you do it. So anything in your past that you can think of that was that thing that really helped you to kind of be the common, that have the common mindset that you have now with regard to how you approach broadband?
Well, what's funny, when I started working for the internet service company, nonprofit in 1994, I was also pursuing a master's degree in library science.
Okay.
So those two have always gone hand in hand as far as I was concerned. So actually, a lot of the time I worked in the library, and I worked for what we'd now called a broadband provider. I worked for an ISP and I worked for a library at the same time. So I was really on the front lines of helping students figure out, somebody's taken out every single book on art. What else can I do? And I'd say, well, let me introduce you to the internet. And it was funny to think back then, but that, these are 18, 19-year-olds, and they've, the computer skills, even 25, 30 years ago, were not what they are today, but introducing them to it, and seeing the excitement that it brought to them and the difference that it meant to them. And I kind of feeling the same excitement, just telling other people kind of some of the funny things that we did back then, during my day job, working for the internet service provider. We, I think once a month, we would have an introduction to the internet. And I think back about it, for some reason, we would talk a lot about TCP/IP, which nobody cares about now, but everybody wanted to know how it all transition control protocol and internet protocol. And I finally would have to sort of say to people, do you know how the message gets to your phone? Let's just worry about it from the user perspective. But so we did a lot of the introductions, and we had people come in, and they were free, and people could learn about them, and that was fantastic. We had every month, this was the unusual thing about MRNet, is we provided internet connection then to people who were sort of more local internet service providers. So we had core group of members that were internet service providers themselves. So what was fun is that I would gather those groups together and hear about what was going on. And the internet community was so small back then that it was, they would talk about, don't let this person get in your dial-up pool. They'll take up all of your time. And, just a lot of things that were really, and I worked with some of the engineers, Dennis Fazio, Dave Burgum, that lots of names, and they were really instrumental in making sure that the networks in Minnesota worked. A lot of the state networks that were, a lot of the networks that became statewide kind of started with MRNet. So and a lot of what I did was translate what the engineers said into what other people could understand. And that took a little bit of a leap for me. So I said I had come from an arts background, an English major, a literary master's. So it was just exciting to see what you could do. And to realize that, I think that was a transition when the internet sort of came about, that you could work with computers and not be a math major. Not just for breakfast anymore.
I can remember the TRS, I think it's TRS 80s, and the old computers that you had to program in order to do a letter and so forth. And it was a challenge to just do a letter. And if you got one thing right, then that letter turned out with the lines merged or 3 extra spaces or something. So it was. And then all of a sudden, the Microsofts of the world came out with, the program that all you could do is click on it and you start typing, and you could do spreadsheets, and nothing was programmed. It was you need to be programmed. And so I remember those days because I had in college I had a Tandy computer, which was a couple steps above that, but it still was not the Microsoft operating system that we see, or the Google or Amazon or whoever has those, dominating operating systems now. So
then once you have some of those, you can concentrate on the content and what you're doing. I mean, I can certainly remember back in the day when I would type out papers, and I was never a very good typist. I mean, now I can type 1,000 words a minute, but I was never. And you would do a typo on on the 3rd paragraph of a page, and you'd rewrite the paper to make that not a typo.
Right.
I'm not retyping that.
Have mistakes back in those
Nope.
days.
Either I'm going to have to learn how to use whiteout, or I'm going to have to reframe my entire thesis, because I am not retyping 3 paragraphs. It has changed the skill sets in a lot of different ways. It's kind of moved us to.
Yeah, I was amazed. I took a class in word processing. At the time, I had a Smith Corona XD80 word processor, and I was just amazed that I could type something and I could back up and correct it, and I could type it and I back up and and I was like, I couldn't type a lick then. Now I'm pretty decent now. But let's talk about the Blandin Foundation. Congratulations, you had one of my favorite people as your speaker, Tom Friedman. And The World's Flat, and all those really good books that he's written.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about him later. But let's talk about the Blandin Foundation. It's a private foundation based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and so
Minnesota.
How did it come about, and what are some of the things that you are that you have been charged with doing there?
Well, the Blandin Foundation is and again, I work there on a contract basis as a consultant, and they've kind of trained me to say that, but I know a lot about what they do. They do a lot of good work. It's paper money. CK Charles, or CK Blandin, was the owner of the paper mill.
Oh, okay.
So it is quite literally paper money, and the mill has been bought and sold in different ways by now. But he started this foundation, and the foundation, the main premise was to take care of the neighborhood, to take care of Grand Rapids, and that extended to Itasca County, that extended to Kuchiching and Itasca County, and eventually what they do is they really support rural Minnesota. They also have an amazing leadership program. Because I live in an urban area, I don't qualify being part of this leadership, but what they do is they will get a dozen, 2 dozen people from different rural communities to go through this leadership program, and it's kind of a year-long program together. So then you've got a cohort of leaders in the community, and that can make some real change. They have they take care of their community and their community people. Anyone I've ever known from Grand Rapids is part of their college has been paid through the Blandin Foundation, so that's fantastic. But as they say about I think I started the Blandin on Broadband blog in 2007. So I'm going to say probably around 2005, maybe a little bit earlier, the Blandin Foundation started getting involved in broadband, which I think we just even called internet back then. They did, and this is really before I was in the broadband community, but not a part of this team. They started a broadband vision that I think was really instrumental in having Minnesota really pay attention to broadband. Before that, there'd been a number of different groups in Minnesota. There was something called TIPPER, the Telecommunication Information Policy Roundtable, which kind of morphed into a group called Plugging In. We had the University of Minnesota. We had some folks from the state. Steve Clift, who has gone on to do a lot of great things with civic education, with democracy and the internet. A lot of stuff was happening in a lot of different ways, but the Blandin Foundation really was able to spearhead, I think, probably for much longer than they intended. And that's one of the funny things about broadband. It's not a build it and you can step away. It's a build it and you build it and you build it and you build it, both because it's the changing nature of the technology, but as we've already sort of discussed, it's that adoption piece. So they have been, they don't build infrastructure, but they help people do feasibility studies. They help people do marketing plans. They help people build the demand, and then they help people with adoption. So they got a lot of funding through the old ARA grants. They got one of the BIP grants, Broadband Innovation Projects grants in 2010. I think. Now I'm going off memory here, so this is a little bit of a memory quiz for me. But in 2010, I think it was maybe $5 million, $6 million to work with 13 different, and I was a part of this project, to work with 13 communities on something called MERC, Minnesota Intelligent Rural Community Networks. And you may recognize some of that name because of what it was a little bit of a morphing with the ICF, the Intelligent Community Forum. Yeah. So it was a foray for the Intelligent Community Forum, and I know you know that well. Sure. And I did think well enough to bring a prop of one of the books, the book that I believe that you sent me. Thank you so kindly. Yes. So it was it was a way to bring that intelligent community idea, platform, and format to some very, very rural areas. And so that was kind of the beginning of the next chapter in a lot of different ways. And there have been communities, cohorts kind of ever since, and they've morphed a little bit since that original MERC program, but it was amazing to see it. And now I'm going to hit my glass ceiling of memory here. But so for 3 years, we did a lot of programming, working on different economic development, education, healthcare, knowledge worker forces, and the 4 cornerstones of the Intelligent Community Forum. Right. And after that, we had done a pre and post survey, and we're able to find that in communities where they had done broadband adoption programs, there was a higher take rate. There was higher adoption than a higher use of broadband in those communities, which helps.
And that's always critical too, because with a higher take rate, the network is more sustainable, and there's just a more economically feasible situation if you got more people buying and paying and supporting the network. So that's always good. Now I see here that and I want to get to what Tom talked about at your conference and a little bit about your conference. But I see here that you've developed a series of e-business courses. Can you tell us what that was and how, what did you develop and what was the motivation to get you doing that?
Sure. At the time I worked for an organization that was Minnesota Technology Inc. They
Mhm.
they have changed names, and I'm going to think of what they're called now soon, but they started an e-business institute, and I think this would have been about 1999.
Okay.
And we came up with a series of 6 classes, and I have to say I still do a lot of training on how to build websites, how to build social media strategies. A lot of the at least a lot of the strategy that worked back to 1999 still works today. So a lot of it really was how to build a website or how to hire somebody to build a website. We worked a lot with manufacturers, and eventually extended it a little bit to Main Street, although the University of Minnesota had a program. I won't say a similar program, but a sort of a parallel program. As they said, that we were working with more B2B businesses and they were working with more retail. But it was it also includes things like supply chain management and HR, just everything, how to integrate technology in a way that would make your company more economically feasible. The other thing that the MTI, which is now called Enterprise Minnesota, at the time, is they did a lot with lean manufacturing. So that was kind of the tie-in too, is how can we use technology to be more efficient? So it was a fun thing. As I said, I've been able to take that. I think back in the day before I did that, I taught a class on the internet at a community college. I taught in the library science program and a master's program at a local college here, local private college here. So it's been fun to help people figure out how to best use the technology for their needs.
That is great. That is great. Now, your advocacy work that you're involved in now. What are the 3 critical things that you're advocating now in this environment, especially in the environment of COVID?
A lot of it is better access at this point, and I do. So there's the Minnesota model that people have liked. For getting broadband, when we talk about border to border broadband, that's kind of the catchphrase in Minnesota. And what's worked well with the Minnesota model is that we have speed goals, statutory speed goals. It's to get to 25.3 by 2022, and then to get by 100 megabits per second down and 20 up by 2026. So one of the things that I'm an advocate for is having those speed goals. What gets measured gets done. I do not. I'm going to say this very loud. I do not speak.
It won't happen. Unlikely to happen.
Right. I mean, that's I've tried some of those diets where you don't step on the scale. They don't work as well as the ones where you do. I mean, that's which gets measured gets done. And I don't speak for the Blandin Foundation, but I would, especially during the time of COVID, urge for relooking at that speed goal of 100 down and 20 up. I think that we need something that is symmetrical. And one of the fun things I got to do this summer was I talked to, I think it was 8 different counties about was broadband a help or a hindrance in their dealing with COVID, which really was a matter of, did you have sufficient broadband or not? I talked to Rock County. Rock County is ranked #1 for broadband access at the speed of 100 by 20 in Minnesota. They have almost 100% coverage in a very rural county. They have fiber to the home throughout most of the county in a very rural county. In Minnesota, when they shut down, due to the pandemic, there was a shutdown. They shut schools for 2 weeks, all schools in the state. That gave the teachers 2 weeks to try to figure out what to do. So while the teachers were figuring out what to do in Rock County, they said, okay, we better figure out, make sure everybody's got internet access. What they had to do to cover the Delta, they had to make it affordable for some people. And then they looked and they said, some people don't have devices. So then they had to get some devices for people. So they made sure that 100% of their students were able to access what they needed to access to do online education in a 2-week period.
That is amazing.
Amazing. In rural Minnesota.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Amazing. And then I talked to other counties where, you know, still they don't have access, because one of the, I mean, we can talk about adoption, but one of the things is you have to be able to access it. You need to be able to access it from your home. And that is likely not going to mean that you are 2 miles away from, you have DSL and you're 2 miles away from the node. You know, you're not. There was there's another county, one family in town in the county, they had fiber to the home, and the 2 parents could work from home and the 2 kids could work from home. And it turned out that they had some cousins nearby without access. So then the cousins would stay by during the week, and they, you know, they're essentially running a small business off their home connection because they have fiber. Now, 3 or 4 miles away is a couple. She's a librarian, he works for the state. They cannot both work at the same time from home. They cannot do a Zoom connection and one check Facebook at the same time.
Oh my.
Now you start with that, and you need those equitable speeds. And we always say, you know, the download speed is great for consumption. You know, I'm a fan of Netflix. You know, talk to me about the Queen's Gambit. I like all those shows, but the upload is production. What we really do. So that's one of the things that I would advocate for, is that production. The other, we are lucky here because we have an Office of Broadband Development in Minnesota, and they're very good. They're very good. They work with residents who call. Sometimes people will call me and I will forward them. I see the maps and the maps are wrong, and I'll say, well, give me the information and I'll write it up, but let me put you to the Office of Broadband Development and they'll do something more with it. And then they deal with all of the providers as well. So they're that go-between as far as that goes. The other thing they do is we have a broadband grant program. I should know how much they've given out in the last 5 years, but let's say it's been going on for 4 or 5 years. It's been funded all but 1 year of those years. And the year that it was not funded it was a political football. It had nothing to do with people liking or not liking broadband. So making sure that fund continues, that the legislature, that the government puts in money for grants, and they're grants. Sure. They're not loans, they're grants. But that makes up the difference, because it's difficult in a rural area, especially. It's difficult when there's that lower population density. And we've got, you know, Rock County is called Rock County for a reason. It's built on rock. So deploying broadband is hard. And then we've got northern Minnesota. We have some gorgeous trees and some rock. I mean, so it is very difficult for a provider to make a business case as far as that goes without getting support from someone else. So getting the fund, having the broadband speeds, making sure that we have the fund, and I would say making sure that the Office of Broadband Development is adequately funded, not only to focus on deployment, but on adoption. One of the funny things about Minnesota is we're kind of resource rich and coordination poor. There are a lot of people in Minnesota doing a lot of good work, but it would be really nice to have a clearinghouse that knew what was happening, a matchmaking service to say, oh, you need to know how to use Word, how to build a website, but you need to have it in Somali, you need to have it in Ethiopia, you need to have it in Spanish. We've got you sorted. We're going to hook you up with the people at Project Fine, and they've got this all in multiple different languages. So those would be 3 of the things that I would advocate for.
So the micro trenching that I hear about, some of these people are companies and networks, organizations are deploying, won't work in some of these places if you got a lot of rock there, because you can't go down the 2 feet in order to put
that's it. And then we've got, it's Minnesota. One good snowfall, you can forget about a lot of airborne connectivity. I mean, I think that's, and then someplace where you've got fixed wireless, that can be great 2 seasons out of the year, but spring comes and the leaves show up, suddenly they're not working as well. So it's, we've some challenges as far as that goes too.
Challenges. Yeah, sure. Now, if you don't know this, you don't have to answer it, but do you know if there's smart farming and if there's anything that is happening in your since you're rural, in terms of farming, is there smart farming, a smart irrigation, those kind of things going on?
Yeah.
Are they?
Yeah, Land O'Lakes is based in Minnesota. And so
Okay.
and they really, there is often, one of the other parts of the Minnesota model is that there's a Minnesota Broadband Task Force, and the head of that task force is now from Land O'Lakes, which has been really a great marriage because he's really brought in a focus from rural areas. So it's every year, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about, we've done an annual broadband conference for as long as you've had your radio show, for 16, 17 years. So we've done it. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've had it. I do something called digital showcase where people come in and show cool tools, that they've adopted. And I've had somebody come from Precision Ag for a couple of years now. And I can only talk intelligently about farming for about 4.5 minutes before we've hit but it is amazing to see just the difference it can make when you're tracking milking cows as far as that goes. Now they talk about, they're really worried about power loss on some of the dairy farms because it's all done online. But the chemistry that goes into just the fertilizing and everything else in the fields is absolutely amazing. I had a funny talk to an older farmer one time, and he said, I love the smart farming. I love the kids that work for me and they figure it out. He said, but now I decided to take a little break in my tractor and I'm getting calls from everybody. What happened to you? What happened? It's like, I just wanted to have an apple. I just wanted to, but just and when you're talking about produce where they're making their money pennies on the pound, the difference that can make. I mean, you look at a farm and you just think, oh my gosh, that's so much. But when it comes down to it, it's pennies to the pound. So if you know the weather, it's going to rain tomorrow and you can save some water today. And again, that's a real non-farmer example of it, but it's,
I get it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's been fascinating to see how some of that has worked.
And with the sensors that tell moisture levels in the ground, and with looking at soil testing and determining whether you need fertilizer, and you have these machines that can go along based on what the GPS says that, and the sensors are telling it, you don't need to put fertilizer down there. It's a waste. It's going to run off. So you save the environment, you save money. So it's this smart farming and smart and intelligent farming has come a long way with technology that's available.
Well, and I heard a farmer say one time that if you're a farmer, you've got 30, maybe 40 chances for big wins, meaning you've got 40 seasons that year. So each year is a new gamble. Each year is a new gamble. But all of these tools, they just help mitigate. They help you card count to continue on with it. They really take some of that risk out of it.
So we probably got about another 5 or 7 minutes or so. I wanted to just do something for fun, something rapid fire for fun. 1 or 2 word answers to the questions I'm going to ask. This is just for fun. So besides the dog, favorite pet?
Rock. In case my children ever watch this.
Favorite car color?
Black.
Black. Okay. Oh, well, you're keeping it really conservative. Your happy food?
Gummy bears.
Gummy bears.
And I mean old school gummy bears. I'm not making a statement here. I mean old school gummies.
Favorite spot in Minnesota?
Ooh. Today, the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden. No, the Turf Club in St. Paul has been closed for a while.
Okay, I have to take your first answer. No,
Okay,
I'm just kidding.
Sculpture Garden, Minneapolis Sculpture Garden.
Something you like about New York. Because you were in New York at the Intelligent Community
Yeah,
Forum.
I love New York. Walking. I was there with all right, I will waste one of my 4 minutes telling the story. I was there with my 3 kids and my dad, and I make everybody walk. I try to walk about 10 miles a day. My
Wow.
children do not, nor does my dad. We're walking and they are hating me. Also, Banksy was there at the time, and they didn't know this, but I had mapped out every Banksy, so we were walking an extra mile. We're walking down, and I don't know New York very well, but we're walking down Bowery, and all of a sudden this black SUV comes up, and I can see all of the paparazzi. And all I can think of is, please let it be somebody these small, these young teenagers know. Please let it. Do you know who gets out of the car and like literally bumps into my 10-year-old at that point? Taylor Stinkin' Swift.
Oh, come on.
I looked at my dad and I said, we should go home right now. They were in all the paparazzi pictures. It was just so walking. Sorry, long answer. Walking.
No, that was good though. That was good. I had the same encounter. We were at my boss's house. She lives like, Central Park West and in the 40s. It was my boss at the time. And so we're all headed back. She had us over for dinner. We had a board meeting that next day. Well, so we've been over to her place for dinner that night. And so we're headed back through Central Park. And, we're all shooting the breeze and, having, really a good time, enjoying each other as colleagues. And all of a sudden this face showed up. And all I could see was they had a hoodie on. I could see it was a face. And I said, "Oh, Chris Rock." He says, "Shh," and he took off running. So, it happens in New York. It happens in California, wherever they're celebrities and movie stars. So the last one is your surprise technology.
This is I am terrible with directions. And I'm kind of a notoriously bad driver. It's a combination. So this isn't a very sexy technology or anything else, but I remember when I was able to put an address in my phone and have it direct me to where I wanted to go. And the next call I made, my dad is a notoriously good driver and good with directions. I said, "Dad, I can get my directions off my phone now. You don't have to take such good care of yourself."
That's your technology. Okay. Got it. So tell us a little bit about your conference and your experience with Tom, and then we're gonna probably bring everything to a close after that because we're just flat run out of time here.
Well, this has been fun. So the Blandin Conference we've done for 15 years. We decided, last March we had and we have some other amazing speakers too. We had Shirley Bloomfield and Roberto Galliardo and Deb Sosha. We had them planned but we realized quickly we are not going to meet in person. So we just slowed our roll, shifted everything. It used to be 3 days kind of in the woods in a beautiful Brainerd or Duluth, or Duluth isn't the woods, but we did a month-long conference and we shot for the stars, and Tom Friedman is from Minnesota.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that.
Tom Friedman is from Minnesota, and the last book that he wrote, Thank You for Being Late, he talks a lot about rural community that he spent a lot of time in, Marshall, Minnesota. So we said, well, heck, let's invite him. And he said yes, and that was fantastic. And it was interesting to have him come in, and he talked a lot about what I think the latest book from the Intelligent Community Forum talked about too, is kind of the speed of how things are happening and how that speed is kind of creating a division. We're creating a division of people who are I don't want to even say able, who are willing to keep up with the speed, and people who are not so willing to keep up with the speed.
All right, so that's a new digital divide.
Yeah. Yep. it's a digital divide, and it's I and it even means sort of more on a political divide. I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of anything
Yeah, no.
necessarily, but it's creating a situation where some people are saying, well, people are losing their jobs, and they think it's because it's because of automation. It's because of the speed of things progressing, and they're blaming other things.
Right.
We'll put it that way.
Right.
So it was really kind of fascinating to talk to him about some of that. He comes from a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, which is a traditionally it's a Jewish suburb. We had Al Franken introduced him. They had gone to the same school. They really kind of enjoyed talking about that aspect of it, but it's near North Minneapolis. So we also got a chance to talk about some of the situation with George Floyd, and that is
yes, I saw
that
that.
is much closer to
that
where
in your details. Yes.
yeah, where I live. So it was really fascinating to talk about just that intersection of, the technology is going so fast, the climate change is going so fast, immigration is going so fast, and just how do we embrace the speed of that rather than and how do we unilaterally, how do we bring out the people who are not so prepared? Some of us are pretty open-armed about embracing the change, and some are digging their heels in a little bit, and it'd be to the benefit of all to find a way to kind of marry those a little bit better.
Exactly. I'm gonna tell you this story, and then I think we will just be right on time, or about our time. In terms of digital divide and digital inclusion, I had a person to come to me who was she was the CIO for the school district of Rochester, New York. I know there's a Rochester, Minnesota as well. That's where the medical
Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic.
Thank you. Yes, I couldn't get that name in my head. Yes, but anyway, this was Rochester, New York. 98% free reduced lunch, meaning that there's high poverty, a lot of transient population, but the common denominator is that none of them hardly had any broadband. And so about 70 to 75% of what kids get in homework now requires some kind of media to complete. And as a result of that, these kids were, either having to run out to someplace, generally to a library or someplace where their family were not able to accompany them, or provide safety for them. So that's a problem in and of itself. And then, there were situations where the other extreme, kids would show back up at school and not have the work done. And so only so many times does that happen, that before the kids become, well, first of all, they fall behind, and then they become discouraged and they can't catch up, and they kind of get in this spiral heading in the wrong direction. And so anyway, we started to work on it. I spoke to Deb Socia about it, and congratulations for having
she's great.
Superb speaker. She's absolutely wonderful. I love Deb, love her, and her husband, her family. Her sister, they're all really wonderful people. But she's in Chattanooga now, which is kind of an odd place to have someone with her brilliance to be kind of out of the mainstream, not in DC or New York or Boston.
Right.
I just love Deb. But anyway, I talked to her about it, and I started to work with the school district, and I never really thought about the problem, to be honest with you. Anyway, where we settled was reaching out to the Sprint, the hotspots that Sprint offered. Ultimately, they've had to retool that program, and they brought it back. I don't know if you know that or not, but they brought that program back. But we put out a survey, the school district did, the superintendent, under the superintendent's name, and at the time, the program was only fitted for high school students. And so now, since COVID, they've kind of expanded it all the way from K to 12, because everybody is home and they need connectivity, and they didn't want to leave anybody out. But they ran out of money because there's only so much money Sprint had for it. So that's why they had to take it down and retool it. But anyway, out of 2,100 students in high school, which I said was the parameters of the program at the time, 1,850, 85% needed some kind of connectivity at home. And so they chose to order the hotspots that you could turn on and power up the Chromebooks and laptops and so forth, and workstations. And that happened way ahead of COVID. So I was really gratified that that school district, was able to go home and work remotely because they'd already, prepared for it. But those are the kind of things that I get involved in. Those are the kind of things that, kind of, just that really fuels my passion.
Yeah, that's a fantastic. It's been amazing to hear what a difference it's made.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, we have some areas that's been fantastic. And I've worked with a bunch of libraries with the checkouts, the hotspot checkouts for years. Unfortunately, there are some areas in Minnesota where those hotspots, they don't work so well.
Yeah. Well, something is better than nothing, but you don't want something that doesn't work. That's
the unreliable. I said,
Yes.
Give me a plan for the bus over a car that's unreliable. It's
exactly. At least I'm gonna get there. It might be slower, but I'm gonna get there.
Well, thank you for the good work on that. And I have to say, I've enjoyed watching some of your shows. I was so impressed. Was it a week or so ago you had Kenneth Morris on?
Yes.
Holy buckets! I enjoyed that show.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind. I really appreciate that. And thank you for your friendship, and thank you for making yourself available. This will run on Sunday at 9 o'clock. So 9 a.m. And if you don't already have, I'll make sure you have the chat. I'll also be simulcasting over Facebook. So it'll be going out on Facebook too. So there's a chat feature there. So, so if anybody has questions, if you're there, you can answer them right in the chat.
All right. Well, because that's 8 a.m. my time.
I know. On a weekend when
everything is shut down, I can probably do it. we just shut down again. So I feel like I could be up at 8 a.m. on a Sunday.
Okay. Well, we start at 6:30 and we go on Facebook. We stick 6:30 to 10. Now, I have 2 hours that I remote broadcast on Skidmore. They only give me 2 hours, and that's from 8 to 10. So the maximum audience here is 8 to 10 when I can get onto there. So
yeah.
And over that medium is also available. That platform is also available to us, so we'll be using that as well.
Awesome. Yes.
And Treacy from the Blandin Foundation in Minnesota, thank you for being our guest.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your good work.
You're welcome.